God Kast, we're back. Nick's fresh off Costa Rica, and we're here today to talk about eclipse season.
The ecliptics.
The ecliptics. Nick, let's just dive in. What's going on up in the skies?
All of it at once, it seems. It's actually pretty wild. Yeah, like Sun, Moon, Mercury, Jupiter, Saturn, Mars, Venus are like all, in the corner of, if there's a corner out there, they're all in the corner of the chart together. And yeah, it's interesting time with Virgo, K2 in Virgo, and Rahu in Pisces. Vedic, of course. Western is the Libra Aries axis, which, I think it could definitely be interpreted as feeling that way, even though the core catalyst is the 6-12 axis versus the 1-7. In the 6-12 axis, they say, is the hardest last transit from 6 to 12. 12's the end. You go from the virgin, the refinement, progress, the separation of the wheat and the shaft, like you're gaining the fruit of the grain in the product and the process. And so it's a very distilling energy quality ruled by Mercury, which is the mind, and then you have K2, which is the lunar south node, which is the lunar eclipse, which is also, a Sag flavor, which is the Sadhu, Sagittarius, K2, like the whirling dervish, renunciate, that's abstaining and purifying from the wisdom of mastery, kind of accesses this divine apathy. And so it's like when you have that kind of like the ascetic sage in the Virgo, enemies and obstacles and health and challenge and progress and refinement, the dark and the light, it's like without enemies and obstacles, there's no challenge to progress and get better. And so like native Virgo people are usually ruled by some sense of enemies and obstacles gut. It's just like Mercury ruled, so it's like you're having to strategize and figure stuff out. And I'm a Virgo. Virgo is kind of the Mercury astrologer degree. I notice most tarot and astrologers on YouTube like are Virgo or have heavy Virgo placements. And yeah, just with all that being said, I feel like a lot of people are refining and letting go and realizing and coming to and shape-shifting.
Let me zero in a little bit more, get more granular here. So we've got tomorrow at 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific, there's a lunar full moon, and then on April 8th, there's a solar solar eclipse.
Right.
Full moon eclipse tomorrow. So in that...
But there's a full moon on the solar eclipse, too, which is also wild.
Really?
Yeah.
So how unprecedented is this?
It's pretty biblical, actually. It's precedented. It's the precedent. It's not unprecedented.
So I want to move into the biblical stuff, but I want to stay top level for just a second and just observe. So tomorrow and this lunar eclipse, is that the distilling force that you're referencing? Is that the lunar aspect of what's happening?
Yeah,
tomorrow's?
K2 Virgo.
Got it.
Yeah.
And I mean, I've done a little bit of my own work on this. I'm not the astrologer you are, but from what I've gathered, there's, it calls in sort of shifts in relationships and contracts and sort of that refreshing, either letting go, distillation. That is different than what we're going to see on April 8th in the solar eclipse. Like how are they different and how are they related as we enter into this sort of
so it's the pendulum
portal?
It's the pendulum. So the most mind-boggling, brilliant, divine mystery of astrology is how you have all 12 signs, magic number 12, and for every sign you have like its epitome equal opposite. It's like the more you unpack it, it keeps unpacking. It's like it just keeps making more and more and more sense. And then the more you learn, the more like you don't know. And it's just like, wow, who created this? It's like, we never did this. But just, yeah, from the Virgo to the Pisces, from the Aries to the Libra, just all the way across. So we're in this pendulum swing of Virgo and Pisces, and so it's like Pisces on the light side is heaven and paradise, foreign travels, the things we all strive for. Like after the work is done, 12th house is the payoff and the payday, or it's the undoing. When you swing to the dark side, it's not just paradise, it's also prison, isolation, the psych ward, the tropical island that turns into hurricane hell, or no ticket out, or Haiti right now. Rahu, Pisces, Haiti, tropical island is actually living hell right now. Oh wait, it's actually called Haiti, Hades. It's like, I don't even want to repeat what's going on there right now, but it's in its Rahu, Pisces, wild, heaven turned into hell. It's like you're doing cannibalism and crazy stuff in the streets, they say, Yet, I was just in Costa Rica at a really beautiful festival in actual tropical jungle paradise. And so, like, watching the stars in my chart and the chart move with me being there, I could see how all the analogies of the placements were, like, really actually playing out.
Are astrological placements, like this eclipse is happening as I see the map over United States, are they localized to the degree in which over Texas or over Ohio, where this is actually happening, it'll be more prevalent than, let's say, in Russia? Or is it a sort of global affair when these types of events occur?
No, I was watching something last night that was showing the cartography of the transits of all the planets, and all the lines, the planetary lines of however it crosses the continents or countries, is the most direct effect of its impact. And yeah. So we in America are going to be feeling the resonance of this April 8th eclipse,
right? Obviously, which goes without saying to some degree.
But what's wild is it's the solar eclipse. Even though there's only one sun, there's other planets, and we're the ones getting the one planet that's having the event. Does that make sense?
We are the ones receiving the moon's coverage over the sun here in America.
Correct.
Yeah. So this is
an
an American, at its core, this is an American event, even though they're also, it ripples out.
The world lives together, even though we all have our own experience.
Yeah.
And countries have their own experience, and that micro, macro, Russian nesting doll kind of fractal. Yeah, and so it's the other planets' transits over the lands that they do also have their effect on those lands. And so, like, the solar eclipse, you can define it simply as like the sun, and it shines, and the fifth house, and it's who we are as an identity, as a nation, as a people, and that identity is getting eclipsed, and nations in turmoil and war and financial crisis and leadership crisis and information crisis, security crisis, like nobody believes anything, nobody can trust anything. It's information overload. There's too much information, too much truth, too many lies.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't matter where you look on the internet, people are screaming from the rafters about this April 8th eclipse as if the world may end. Now, we don't know what's actually going to happen, but if you look around our culture, it certainly feels, and has felt for many years, obviously, like everything's about to break. So it's not like, next month here that we'll actually cross the Rubicon, but there is a feeling, at least in the discourse I've consumed regarding this, that all of these variables are swirling closer and closer together. And I mean, I think anybody that has any sort of sense of where we are in time, even outside of astrology, if you have any like truthful sense-making apparatus, there is this feeling that inevitably something has to happen. Like something's gonna happen, and like there's all of these people alluding to get your properties ready, get out of the cities, and all of these big dramatic claims. But who knows, and that feels more and more possible, whether it's on April 8th or whether that's in some of the coming years. But it's just sort of looking bird's eye view at where we are as a nation. It's all of those things you said.
And my anecdote to all of the biblical, historical, ancient, and modern recent past, whether World War II, Civil War, War of 1812, you name it, or, the Grapes of Wrath and the Dust Bowl, or, pick any what we would perceive as a macro historical event, and then put yourself in your shoes of a grand event that happened in your life, and then go read the story of that event. It's only like a 1 year, 2 year, 3 year window that any major historical event usually happens within. And so as a collective hyperbole, we focus on these things in the past we didn't experience as these groundbreaking, shape-shifting events as if they were world-making or breaking, but we just went through probably the most significant world-make-break scenario in actual history that we know of.
COVID.
Yeah, like the whole world came to stop at once, actually. Like, they didn't even do that in biblical times,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, maybe the world melted and caught on fire, and
Yeah, I mean, I think there's something dramatically resonant about the eclipses, and that it's an actual like pinpointed moment, and and we all desire the the movie or the
just
song.
To finish that thought real quick, reality is like phi, and we never ever hit zero. No matter how bad it gets, the end point of the terminal crisis never actually, even when you're dead, like you're dead, you don't know it. So it's like you still don't even get the experience of that, because you're like popping into another world.
Is an eclipse necessarily, I know an eclipse is sort of a moment of strangeness in which it's sort of like our reality is upside down to a certain degree, but is it necessarily bad, or is it just a moment of transition or change and sort of, articulating, the potentiality
without a
of
tower moment, which is a bad, the tarot card is a tower. You have the moon represents loss, mystery, all that, trauma, just the emotional realm, and if emotions aren't great, they're usually bad. And so it's like the moon wonders if it's going to be great, so it gets bad even though nothing's happening. Because the moon's the fastest spinning body, and so it moves the fastest. Mercury's our mind, but Mercury moves half as fast as the moon, probably. I don't actually know, but it has to be at least. And and so the lunar thing is psychological, because the moon represents our emotional algorithm, which kind of rules the whole experience regardless of the truth. So what's the truth? Your emotions and your feelings, or the actual reality? Well, for you it's your emotions, but for like the collective it's the facts. And so like the facts can get eclipsed, and I think the signs that are the nodes are in are the flavors of facts or feelings or events, and what area of the cosmic clock our time is up in.
Yeah.
And so it's like the grand distribution, defrag, trash dump of the mind in each sign as the nodes change every 2.5 years. So we all get a collective exercise workout in different areas, and it's like cosmic musical chairs with the planets, And so everybody, like, we don't have anything else to do but look at the stars. Like, not one thing in reality deviates from the ascent or the gaze or the naming or the interpreting or the emulating of the mythos celestial story. And so it's wild, we're always predicting in the weather, literally, and we're obsessed with the future. And that's all Rahu, the future, 12th house, foreign lands, what are we doing, what's going to happen, And so, like, the K2 Rahu is this lunar hyperbole axis that the ego is functioning in, and as together as well, as a collective. And, for me as an astrologer, it's just, you're just watching the demographic data, population, psychology map of the herd or the school of fish or the birds or the people. It's Mercury's the data tracker. And so, like, nothing's really happening. Things are just moving. And how we interpret that moving is the experience we label it. But then the experience we label it is your unique nature thumbprint of your chart. So zooming back out to the collective meaning, of these nodes and the signs, it's good to keep it simple, but it can be very complex in one person's life.
Yeah. And I found in my explorations of astrology thus far that it's the meaning-making mechanisms are most fruitful, interesting, and applicable to me when I look at them in hindsight in a certain way of trying to tell what's going to happen is
More
a fool.
digestion. Hindsight's 20/20.
Yeah, and I'm not sold that we can even tell what's going to happen, even though the planets are going to move somewhere and maybe we have feelings that things are going in a certain way. That does that even serve us to try to forecast the future in any, like, what's going to happen on April 8th?
Well, ironically, yes, that's what astrology's for.
Forecasting the future.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
It's what the whole thing is for. The whole thing is about like mundane prediction, and it's God's gift to humanity to have some. It's a celestial map, navigation of the soul and reality, and so we're not like cursed by a parentless God who has no care for his kids, to like give them a flashlight and a map in the dark in this unknown land so we can find our way, or at least have some bearing of origin. Like maybe we're not there's nowhere to go and we're all just wandering and roaming.
Mm-hmm.
Creation, just there's nothing else to do, so we just keep recycling and
Mm-hmm.
keep rotating around the chart, and we're just getting all these infinite iterations of ascendants and sun, moon, Mercury. It's like we're soul jumping in this time code clock, and I believe that we have to have all the iterations of completing the chart. Like until you're the last man in the musical chair seat, you're going to keep playing that game till you get to win.
Mm-hmm.
And ironically, Pisces is that, and our node is the North Node is in that sign, and so Pisces is the biblical end times fish symbology in all of its shapes and forms. Christ, the 12th house, the 12 disciples, the sun in the 12th house, Rahu. We feel like the world's going to end. I mean, it's a holy hyperbole of all the adjectives you could possibly throw at it.
Are the biblical ramifications of this across this whole eclipse portal, or is it specific to the lunar eclipse or the solar eclipse, or what, with more specificity? I understand from like a broad perspective how there's sort of biblical ramifications to the way we can make sense of these things, but more specifically, what are the sort of quote unquote biblical aspects of what's happening right now astrologically?
Trying to grab the thought, but if you look back at the latest time in history where this same or similar, almost exact transit occurred, I think I remember it was like almost 2,000 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so, yeah, it's wild to just see the similarities, and there was also something with 1776 that was also happening right now, and we're in this larger cycle, and then there's more smaller micro cycles, and so I think the collective experience almost exists and doesn't exist because your own experience dominates, and your chart is generating your experience for you. We have a kinship in our chart to actually share an experience. And everybody watching this, we're tied together with our own karmic charts code to actually share the same bandwidth of reality reference.
So are you trying to say that the biblical ramifications are internal and personal to us, that it's a biblical, and like in my life right now, as we articulated a little bit in the last time we talked, but even since, like my life's been in hyper speed with Christ and a sort of deeper diving into Christianity and a shedding or at least an exploration and observing of a lot of the other spiritual practices that I've been involved in that I'm not actually sure are serving Christ, insofar as Christ would be rendered as the one true Lord. Now, that's a whole theological discussion, but for me, this moment is very biblical. It's the most tethered I have been to the Christian myth, my relationship with God the Father and Christ in my whole life.
You see it across the country, too.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you read news headlines or if you hear headlines or whatever you follow, there's, Christ or Christianity's resurging and, the whole holy war thing we're in, with the Middle East right now, Ukraine, that's all religious holy war. And don't confuse what's happening.
No, and it feels, and perhaps man has felt like this since the coming of actually the man Jesus, but that we're on the precipice of the actual Antichrist, and that whole mythology, whether it's rendered temporally as a reality in our world or just is the awakening of the revelation within inside me, feels real. It's both inside me and in the news and the books I'm consuming.
Right. Yeah, and it's like, it's the employers versus the employees. It's the people versus the state. It's the peasants versus the king. It's the customer versus, the banker, the people in the banks, or, it's that it's that polarity, and then the biblical analogy is representative of like all those power struggles, like whether you're in Palestine getting bombed out or whether you're Israel thinking you were offended and you're defending your honor. It's all, everybody's doing their own right best action, whether they're right or wrong.
Yeah.
Which is wild, and then like even with Russia and its ancient Orthodox Christianity and, there's high Jewish population in Ukraine and, we got Israel and Gaza and Palestine is Christian. Bethlehem is where Jesus was, and then they want to rebuild the temple. And I mean, like we're in peak, like biblical time reality. But we're always in, I think, like, it's always biblical. We're just too young and adolescent and ignorant to realize the reality we're even partaking in.
Perhaps, and that may be true, but my feeling as a participant in the technological universe we live, and I know your belief is that we've had all these other phases of technological utopia, and like that may be true, but at least in the history that
our short now history.
Yes. Whatever myopic, individuated version of history that I have imbibed and that I'm experiencing as I'm watching the acceleration of artificial intelligence and the computers that I've grown up on.
AI is Rahu.
Yeah, however we define it, that accelerating thrust that seems to inevitably be moving towards some sort of singularity moment, whether that's an actual cybernetic singularity or just some sort of black swan paradigm shift, that it's increasingly impossible for me to untether that from the actual religious history, that the actual moral, ethical ramifications of that seem part and parcel to my engagement with Christianity. And thus, well, yes, maybe we've always felt like that. Maybe it's always happening, but there feels like something actually on the ground in the actual reality I partake in through my computer, through the internet, that is more than just, oh, Joe, you're feeling this on the inside, but that culturally, globally, we are accelerating towards some point, and that point, is it the omega point? Like the actual reality of Christ's coming, that yes, every Christian has been sort of feeling in their bones since the man actually came.
Is it a projection or an actual reality?
And that's the sort of infinite question, and perhaps it's fun for the man, the time, to say, well, like, no, it's a real reality. You don't get it. Like, this is happening, but at the same time, like, something has to happen.
But did the people in the time of Jesus even know he was Jesus? All the stories we read are 400 years later, But
I don't think those stories would actually last. I don't think.
No. Hear me out though. I'm not saying any of it's false. I'm saying, like, as me and you sitting here now, like, we think we know who we are, but we don't know who we are compared to the future looking back at us. And so there's a part of the present reality then that, knew something big was happening, but maybe they didn't know it was going to be that big. You see what I'm saying?
Not wholly.
Like, wholly.
There you go.
Well, we're trying to see the whole E, the whole part of the energy. But like the people in Jesus's time obviously knew he was somebody. Like, whether you thought he was a parlor trick magician and he was just a rogue Jew, or he was actual Jesus that came to save the peasants, and he was actually performing like magic divine magic, not just parlor tricks, because I've heard, like Ben Shapiro said he was just like a parlor trick person.
Yeah.
But you see the difference of the lens of the perspective, like some people give him all credit and some people give him no credit. You know what I mean? And that's a very real and valid polarity of the reality, and so you're on one side, everybody's on their own side of the coin.
Yeah, exactly. But I think for me, if I was to identify as a Christian, if I was to take that label, which I think I do increasingly. I mean, I am baptized and I grew up Catholic, and I think my own journey with the church this is not the time for that. But if one is to identify actually as Christian in the truest sense, then they do abide by that actual mythos that the man was who it all says he was, and that the whole sort of trajectory is
I'm just calibrating
true.
From the present looking back, we can only have that whole ethos and doctrine internally in the present self. But I was just alluding to the fact of, like, in the present now, even if we are in an even greater repeat biblical time of some things that will live on, maybe even bigger than the Bible, maybe not, but like we can't consciously presently cognize that we're in such a pivotal moment, like we don't know even though we feel. And so there's that collective paradox with, like, even though we all feel it's biblical, we're like waiting for the big message to drop out of the sky, and this is a biblical moment.
The way that we make sense of what this moment is most likely not the actual thing that it will be seen as in 400 years, and that me sitting here trying to put the pieces together as if I have some perspective on the sort of history of humanity. Obviously, in my humility, I have to acknowledge, well, I have no idea what's going on, but it's only the feeling
that
or the
internal,
sense.
Like whole, and not to diminish your feelings or the whole feelings. For me, Rahu, Gemini, wanting to understand all the psychology and the feelings, it's one of my favorite places to look, is that juxtaposition of, like, the past versus the now, and, like, the I versus the we, or the me, or the, like, even attempting to put myself in the shoes then. It's I just find it important to, like, keep that little sprinkle of perspective on the table.
Perspective on certitude?
Yeah, and just third-partying myself from the experience.
Yeah.
Because that like, when we dive into that hyperbole, it's like we're almost willingly crucifying ourselves to some version of truth.
Yeah, and I think there's a part of faith in the Christian sense that necessitates that self's involvement, which is sort of a gambit. I think one that moves into the Christian myth has to sort of reconcile, or something I'm working through in terms of
martyr culture.
Say more. What do you mean?
Well, like the need to attach or adopt to something, whether it's, it's like, I think Christianity is more of a martyr culture. We do with less. It's renunciate, the monks and the whole thing, abstinence and Lent and diet and, like kind of purifying, right, and just like Jesus was kind of a renunciate to a degree, and like, so we're like the disciples, and disciplined disciple, they had discipline to follow and do the things that they did with Jesus in the way that they did him, and that archetypal narrative is what collectively drives culture too. It's like the Bible is the most popular book in the world, and every country and continent of all people, like, somehow it's a part of, like, even the most remote areas. It's kind of wild.
To bring us back to the eclipse, I think this all ties into that. I mean, obviously there's these sort of inner biblical ramifications as we're getting at here, but there's sort of, like, one's faith in Christianity, there's a sort of ineffable sense of the thing that goes beyond rationality, or even goes beyond the self's sort of intellectual attempts at making sense of it. And I think the eclipses, or at least tease that mystery is sort of teased out of us, at least for me. It's like, there is this ineffable mystery towards this strange movement that's occurring that turns everything upside down, that is impossible to make sense of, but still sort of titillates some deeper part of me that is I can't totally touch. And I think that's the sort of my personal intrigue with the sort of at least coming solar eclipse, is they're like, oh, it's this like big moment, is the like it's like the thrust towards claiming Christ as the Messiah and that whole mythology. It's like parallel to some degree of like the thrust of like seeing the April 8th eclipse as this massive moment in time in which all things will be known and everything will shift. You know, some of it's just, you know, oh, the self seeing, it's the self wanting to see itself at an integral moment in the humanity, right?
And I think the collective fervor is an aspect of the actual energies of the eclipse. Mm-hmm. You know, the Virgo Pisces axis. You know, Pisces is that infinite, wild, creative imagination. It is the Holy Land. It is the underworld. You know, with Virgo, and so. Yeah, I think a lot of people are experiencing challenges of enemies and obstacles and, you know, make up, break up. And to really dial in on one of the flavors of what's happening right now is largely it's a benevolent eclipse, and it's going to give us what we couldn't get or get rid of what we couldn't let go.
The lunar eclipse or the solar eclipse? The benevolent that you're getting at.
The lunar. Because of that Virgo refinement, K2, renunciate, you know, the renunciation of the, you might be in the renunciation of the refinement, or you might be in the refinement of the renunciation, but that's a very different direction. Mm-hmm. You know, and I think, you know, there are a lot of people in tower moments of life right now, and I mean, one could argue, oh yeah, there's somebody's being born and dying every minute. Mm-hmm. But I think the collective flavor is usually more specific than just something always constantly happening and just making it vague in general.
Do you feel like that collective, we all feel that collective flavor is more and more integrated in this sort of globalized, internetized world, in which there is an actual collective flavor because we're all connected, wherein 300 years ago, what the collective flavor may have existed, but we weren't all individually tethered to it in our pockets.
And so to directly respond to that, what's wild, you know, even in the very nature and context of this whole conversation right here, is Rahu Pisces. Oh wait, we're in the age of Pisces. Rahu is now in Pisces. Rahu has gone through the wheel in the North Node in the Christ, fish, Jesus, crucifixion, end times, and death sign. And then so we're moving to the age of Aquarius, which is aqua, Aries, water, fire, electricity. But Rahu's going from Pisces to to Aquarius as well. I think the mood's, and which is AI. You know, and so Aquarius is the internet. It is all that electrical, algorithmic, telepathic, nervous system, you know, just like brain, computer, social network, 11th house reality. And so on a very specific, tangible level, like the archetypal flavor of the ages is most easily seen through astrology, you know, more than we could zoom in into one person's life. I mean, as easy as we could, but it's like that macro shift. You can really look at the flavor of the times and actually see it. Mm-hmm. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. And that's the part of it that I think I'm most drawn to, and what's most intrigued me is like when mentioning Aquarius, like right in one of like our first conversations afterwards, you mentioned Aquarius and the internet and the sort of, you know, I always joke I'm a 21st century digital boy, which is the name of this Bad Religion song. But that, like, I grew up on computers, and while I don't spend all my life on computers, they're what my trade is and what I sort of understand and how I view the world and my information consumption, as many of us do. Anyone that's listening to this right now is doing it through a device, and these are just such substantial parts of our being and the way we're making sense of the world, and how that is actually reflected astrologically right now, and how as you just said, how we're actually seeing that through, you've said before, and I've heard others say, like Aquarius is the sort of reflection of that internet-y, networked increasingly globalized communicative world we're living in.
Yeah, all the waves. Aquarius is the waves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like this is an Aquarius experience for
Right.
anyone that's tuning in.
Yeah, it becomes a paradox and almost a hall of mirrors. Like once you start talking about it, it just like starts to loop, you know. And I think that also is Aquarian communication, and people that are Aquarius ruled can get in a head stuck, wordy, loopy, information overload space. And Aquarians don't like to think, they like to feel. When they're in their Mercury, it is confusing because I don't have even a self to reference. I'm Aquarius, I'm taking care of, like, I am the network, I'm not a person. You know, back to Aquarius is that mother archetype, where like Capricorn is that father, Saturn, but they're both Saturn ruled. So it's like we said in an episode ago, it's like even mothering is masculine energy. And so it's like really the same old answer is always valid. It's like no matter where we are in any time of the world, no matter what is going on, whether it's me, we, you, or the collective, the 0 point, the center point, we're all moving to the center. You know, it's like the calm place is in the center of the eye of the hurricane, and the astrology is like being on the edge of the merry-go-round, and kids getting flung off, but you want to get to the center. And like, yeah, the chart was right, but it also doesn't matter because I'm not in the momentum of the periphery. I'm in the center. Like I used the chart. I read the chart. I responded. I heard the call, and I listened to the wisdom, and I ran to the center because I knew the speed was picking up. And so in the revolutions and the RPMs and the gravity and the mass shift, that's why the chart is valid and relevant. And so like the goal and the solution is always the same: stillness, peace, equanimity. Like nothing should ever be happening unless I'm not reading the chart. Then I will get hit by all the happenings.
Would you say, so we alluded to this earlier, and I think you're alluding to now. Would you say your, as Nick's primary MO with astrology is in forecasting what is to come and to brace yourself for that? Would you say that's your core involvement with it?
I think that is the core involvement of astrology. And yes, for me, because as I learn and study astrology, that's what I gather. And
can I ask you for a specific example of a period in your life recently, and you can go as specific as you want, in which that occurred, in which you clocked something that was occurring and you were able to act in a certain way in advance?
Yeah, I think it's always a little more blurry and vague, and embracing for a strong gust of wind you still couldn't see, even though you felt. And so it's like, I don't live in this analysis paralysis or analysis celebration. Oh yeah, I got it right, or oh whoa, I missed that one, or look, here's this one. You know, for me, it's like the weather is important because we plan our day, right? Or we're planting food, or
like I looked at the weather forecast last night and saw that it wasn't going to rain this morning, so I'm building a chicken run, and I was able to go outside.
Right. Yeah, I can have a good day. The sun's shining.
Yeah, well, so like that's a very ground level example of utilizing a weather forecast, but
that's exactly anecdotally the way you look at astrology.
So so
you can know the mental weather of the day while you're in a good state and prepare yourself. Oh wait, shit, you know, the moon and Mars are going to be together. Like I really need to watch my frustration, or you know, the sun, Venus, or you know, whatever. Like so I can always orient to the center and know when it's okay to indulge in the high or allow the low because I can't stop it anyway, but at least I know it's going to be a rainy day or even possible freezing weather after it was wet and now there's black ice. At least I know not to get on the road.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, it's like astrology isn't a thing that I'm using to predict an actual thing, but it's just a core vibrational attunement of my own emotional reality. And if, or as, you know, it aligns, or I know those feelings are coming, you know, it's like I am light, I am love, yet I'm in a world of also a shitstorm of other things too. And so I don't want to confuse myself with something I'm not, but I need to know that which is not me is coming in order to stay clear.
So then on that note, let's talk about first the lunar eclipse and the solar eclipse in terms of what then would one expect to feel, given that everything we've talked about alludes to that, like where you are, who you are, and how you make sense of your world and astrology. It's going to shift. But from the broadest sense, like what is one then bracing for even internally as they move to their center and be aware of the psychic movements, emotional movements within them, given these two eclipses or this very portal that we're in from an emotional perspective?
The most accurate way would be to do like an ascendant-based analysis. And like if you're an Aries ascendant, then, you know, your Rahu is in the natural 12th house and your Ketu's in the natural 6th house. But if you're a Taurus ascendant, now your Rahu is going to be in the 11th house. You know, so then you got Pisces in the house of Aquarius. You know, so then that starts to give you an actual flavor. But, you know, Aries has it easy because it's number one and it's in the first place and all of the signs are in their natural placements. None of them are exalted, but they're all in a strong, stable footing. You know, Aries is naturally, or Mars is naturally exalted in Capricorn, where the sun is exalted in Aries. But, you know, the sun isn't exalted in Leo in his own sign, even though he's on the throne in his own house. And Aries, like the sun is on the battlefield, like conquering new land, expanding his kingdom. Versus, so like if we go through a whole ascendant analysis, that would give like a collective group psychology for each sign group of people.
Is there a collective group psychology just for the general collective? Like what's the most generalized emotional color or texture of those two eclipses?
So yeah, Rahu Pisces, it's, you know, there's too many people here to generalize it, but everything we've talked about until now is the general analysis of Rahu Pisces, the whole biblical reality in the past 2 years, the whole Christian resurgence, the whole biblical everything is Pisces. And so it's like it's easy to bypass the traction of the meaning, but it is that literal. Like Rahu and Pisces, you know, we're all feeling 12th house things right now, which is death, undoing ends. You know, a lot of things are ending, financial systems and governments, and, you know, whatever you're following, the set's changing. You know, like everybody knows we're about to be in a whole new holy shit reality. Regardless of what happens, whether the white hats or the black hats win, it's changing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, of course, of course.
You know, whether you're into gold or silver or crypto or, you know, some picket, like we're in the pivot point of the shift. Like we've been going through the whole chart, you know, and it's the nodes, like 17 and a half, 18 year transit for the nodes to go through. All of it. I think it's 2.5 years per sign. No, it's 20 and then 12. Yeah, either way.
Yeah.
It's been a long time to get back to Pisces again. So like we don't have a present collective memory because we were really young last time we were in Rahu, Pisces, Virgo. And nobody else probably really remembers unless you're an astrologer and that's what you track. And so, yeah, just that, and then the collective experience of the distillation, the economy's doing what it's doing, and I need to clean my house, fix my car, fix my sink. I need to get everything square. It's like the apocalypse readiness for Virgo is the carpenter that prepares for the end time event, like that prepper apocalypse. Virgo's the carpenter. Oh wait, Jesus was a carpenter, but the sign was the Piscean fish. Wow, that's interesting, right? And in order to know God, you need to have a strong amount of Mercury in order to understand astrology. Well, that's not an accurate statement. In order to understand astrology, it's like you can know God with just your own divine experience, but like you need a strong Mercury to have a strong logic to track an actual pattern record or do the math, so to speak. And that's Virgo. Virgo's the Mercury-ruled builder, mechanic, fixer, doer, maker, which is also kind of what we're having a polarity of going into. Some people are really getting back to the earth and wanting to make their own bread again and especially here in Asheville, it's like earth and roots-based culture where it's like, yeah, we need cell phones and computers, but I'd rather be outside.
Yeah. Yeah. Like here we are.
Yeah, right here.
Yeah,
It's a blend of both if you're lucky. It's like,
I
don't reject or renounce anything, but too much of anything will kill you.
Yeah.
You got to remember what it means and what it's all about. And
yeah,
that 0 point of presence. If I don't have presence, I don't have anything. And so anything that's stealing my presence is something we need to be aware of in order to be aware, to have the ability and freedom to just have nothing to be aware of, which is pure presence, which is the ultimate wealth.
Yes, it is. I think that's a good place to stop. People will have nothing after this, and they can just sit in their pure presence. Well, good luck to everybody in the coming Eclipse portal. We hope you enjoyed this, and we'll see
when
how.
In doubt, do nothing.
All right. Signing off. God Kast.